Meanwhile, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is due to hold talks with his Turkish counterpart in the coming hours at the UN in New York in a bid to smooth over Turkey's objections.
We want to solve the problems we have in our relationship with the United States. The meeting in Rome in October, the meeting between our President and President Biden, was important in this regard. We established a strategic mechanism on Mr. Biden's suggestion. The goal of this mechanism is to resolve bilateral or regional issues on which we disagree and work on taking joint action on these issues. We held an initial meeting in Ankara between deputy foreign ministers. Following the meeting, Secretary of State Antony Blinken on the foreign ministerial level, it is our hope to have a meeting on the presidential level this year, within this framework. I hope that by proceeding in a result-oriented way within this mechanism's framework we are able to resolve or minimize our issues, and also expand our cooperation.
It is not for me to speak for the Turkish government or to characterize their position. What we can do is characterize what we heard inside the NATO ministerial, what we have heard in bilateral and multilateral, including in conversations as an alliance with our fellow NATO allies. There is strong consensus, there has been strong consensus for admitting Finland and Sweden if they so choose to join. And again, as you heard from the Secretary, we are confident we'll be able to preserve that consensus.
For more, Arise Chief Correspondent John Cookson joins us now from London. John, thank you very much for joining us on Newsday. What are you hearing about the latest Ukrainian fighters who surrendered in Mariupol?
Hi guys, great to be on Newsday again. Well, the latest is that, yesterday we heard of 265 Ukrainian soldiers surrendering to Russian forces, having been holed up in Mariupol for many weeks now, in fact 82 days. Today comes news that 694 further soldiers have now been taken away, gave themselves up and taken away to an unknown destination. Now the first batch of injured soldiers were taken to military hospitals in Russian-held territory. We don't know what's happened to the almost 700 who've just surrendered to Russian forces, probably taken to military camps somewhere in Russian-held territory in the Donbass. At this hour, the Russian parliament, the Duma, is debating what to do with these Ukrainian soldiers, and their fate seems to be very much in the balance at the moment. Now, in theory, Russia is a member of the Geneva Convention, and all soldiers who've been taken as prisoners of war, if indeed they're classed as prisoners of war by the Russians, have to be treated in a humanely way and given medical treatment and access to the Red Cross and all that kind of thing. Now, Russia doesn't have a good track record on that, so there has to be some concern today as to what's happening to these Ukrainian soldiers who've been, as I say, holed up in bunkers beneath the steelworks in Mariupol, bunkers that were meant to resist even a nuclear attack. This is a 17 square kilometre area of land right in the heart of Mariupol, an extraordinary complex, but that siege did end yesterday, and as far as we can tell, there are no more Ukrainian soldiers to come out, but there may well be one or two stragglers somewhere in this vast site.
Well, there's concern about the fate of some soldiers in Russian hands. Why is that?
Yeah, well, some of them include members of the Azov battalion. Now, this battalion was formed back in 2014 to fight Russian rebels in the Donbass region. They were initially trained by the Americans. There were many foreign fighters that joined this particular right-wing neo-fascist battalion back in the day. Now, the Ukrainian government went through the process of incorporating them into the National Guard, and the Ukrainian government's official line is that the original bad guys, if you like, have all been dispersed and are no longer members of this particular battalion. And indeed, when I was in Kiev in March, I did meet members of the Azov Brigade, and they did seem like regular soldiers. But that's not to say that there aren't still a lot of neo-fascists within the battalion, which numbers about 900 altogether. There are Russian MPs who are saying that they should stand trial, and if found guilty of war crimes, they should be executed. So there is a lot of concern about these men, and indeed many Russian MPs are saying that they shouldn't be exchanged for Ukrainian soldiers, as we were originally told just a couple of days ago.
All right, the first war crimes hearing begins in Kiev today. What more can you tell us about this?
Yes, the first young man in the dock is Vadim Shishmarin, aged 21. He was a Russian tank gunner. Now, he was on patrol with his men north of Kiev soon after the invasion back in February. And it was noticed that a Ukrainian cyclist, aged 62, had a mobile telephone and was quite near to where the tank where this Shishmarin's tank was. And the fear was by Russian commanders that the cyclist might give away the Russian positions to the Ukrainian army. So Vadim claims that he was ordered to shoot the cyclist, which he did. It's not in dispute that the cyclist was killed. So this is the first of many, probably hundreds of war crimes trials that are going to take place in Ukraine. It's a sensitive subject given the fact that the Russians are also holding many Ukrainian soldiers prisoners of war, including those, of course, from Mariupol. So it's a very delicate process. At the same time, lawyers from the International Criminal Court are on their way to Ukraine to begin their investigation into further war crimes, especially in villages and towns north of Kiev back in February and March of this year.
Now, John, both Sweden and Finland formally applied for NATO membership today. How long will this process take?
Well, normally it can take a country years to get a NATO membership, but my sense of it is it can, in this case, Ukraine's case, probably take Finland and Sweden's case, take just weeks, such as the impetus that seems to be and the unity of NATO. But there is one sticking point, that Turkey is totally opposed to Sweden and Finland's membership because it claims that Sweden harbours what it calls terrorists. These are references to Kurdish separatists who've taken up residence in Sweden. So. And indeed, Turkish President Erdogan said yesterday that the Swedish diplomats wanted to go and see him in Ankara to try to persuade him to change his mind on this. And Erdogan said, don't bother making the trip because you're absolutely wasting your time. But to answer your question, in theory, in this particular case, membership could take just only a few weeks.
Arise Chief Correspondent John Cookson, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.